galore we can talk about. But this is an incoming president who is going to be looking at a city he has spent so much time in and looking at the beauty in it. And then once, and you can see there, I mean, it's absolutely just stunning right now. And then once the sun sets, they'll light it back up in order to pay tribute to the more than 400,000 people who've lost their lives from this horrible virus.
You know, what Joe Biden
How do I
is
edit
doing tonight
that?
is just an expansive version of what he does on an individual basis to people, as you described, Jake, consoling them, helping them through grief, helping them learn how to memorialize, and helping them understand how to move forward. And what this country has not done over the last year is really truly mark the loss of all of these lives, 400,000 and more Americans, brothers and sisters and family members who are no longer there. And it's really important to have this moment on the eve of what will be a celebration tomorrow, a reflective moment for this country in a place on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial that has such significance for this country because it has seen so many different powerful moments. I think tonight will be another one of those powerful moments. And it will be important for the people who have lost loved ones to know that in the highest offices of this land, that their loss matters. Yeah. That has been really missing. We can't just move on from every single person who has lost their lives over the last year. And it is fitting that they would be marked. But, we should note, 400,000 Americans, they couldn't even get that many flags, on to the National Mall. I mean, it's just an extraordinary number. It is hard to fathom. I don't think that at any time in this country's history, at once, in such a short period of time, that we've had to mark that magnitude of death. And so it's important for this country to take a moment and to pause before we celebrate a marker of our democracy, to pause and just to remember what we've lost.
The United States, the people of this nation have been traumatized quite a bit in the last few years. And one of the ways that trauma can be imposed or inflicted on people is with indifference, is with callousness. And the lack of a leader bringing us together to mourn has been one of those traumas. The lights that you're seeing right there around the reflecting pool are going to be illuminated in a few minutes as a gospel singer sings Hallelujah, and those lights will go on around the reflecting pool, as well as throughout the country around other iconic buildings. I want to bring in Sanjay Gupta, our senior medical correspondent, to talk for a moment. Sanjay, you and I have been talking since February about this horrible pandemic, and one of the frustrations that we've shared on air is the lack of compassion, the lack of empathy coming from the highest quarters. This event tonight will be a marked diversion from that callous indifference.
Yeah, Jake, I mean, it struck me. I wrote this column last year, and I wrote it because I realized there has been no real center of grief around this pandemic. I mean, the virus has largely kept us apart, so much tragic individual loss has happened behind closed doors. I mean, behind funeral home doors, behind hospital doors, behind nursing home doors, behind front doors. There is not that center of grief. And as a result, people have not been able to come together. And I think it's affected certainly how we think about this pandemic. I think as a country, maybe to some extent, how much or how little some have taken it seriously as well. But that center of grief and not having it, as you do after other national tragedies like 9/11 or Hurricane Katrina, or after a school shooting of some sort, has not been there. And I think events like this are important in part for that reason. It doesn't solve it, but I think the idea that it's a reminder of this grief. I mean, this has been a terrible chapter.
The other thing that will be a big difference, of course, is the fact that the incoming President Biden will focus a lot more about this, but also he has said that he will be straightforward and honest about the pandemic and the conditions of the country. And in fact, Wolf Blitzer, he has said that things are going to get worse before they get better.
And he's being very honest because this clearly is going to get worse before it gets better. But hopefully the vaccine distribution will get on track and we'll be able to deal with this. You know, John, I'm looking at the schedule for this memorial at the Reflecting Pool, the Lincoln Memorial, that's about to take place. It's so moving what we're about to see. Let me just set the scene. It's about to begin any minute now. The first African-American cardinal here in the United States, Archbishop of Washington, Cardinal Wilton D. Gregory, will deliver an invocation. He'll introduce the Vice President-elect Kamala Harris, who will speak. And then a Detroit nurse, Lori Key, who sings to patients, will sing Amazing Grace. And that will set the scene for the President-elect to deliver remarks.
The President-elect, the Vice President-elect will speak. By this time tomorrow night, there will be President Biden and Vice President Harris. Vice President Harris, a woman, Vice President of the United States, a woman of color, Vice President of the United States. Because of all the drama, because of the security, because of the insurrection, some of the history not getting some of the attention it deserves, including the rise of Kamala Harris to the vice presidency. But as Sanjay was just noting, and Jake and Dana before that, this is the first change. Joe Biden will not be president until noon tomorrow, but this is the first signal of change. A president with empathy and a president who says, I'm responsible. I'm responsible for the things my government does. Donald Trump has just shoved the pandemic to the sidelines, ignored the scientists, and ignored the American people as they've had the pain of this pandemic and as they have needed more help. But it's only one change, Wolf, as we wait for that ceremony. In the building behind us today, a handful of the Biden cabinet picks got hearings, and what a stunning presentation of the change that is coming. The defense secretary, the soon-to-be defense secretary, says he will lift the ban on transgender Americans serving in the military. The president-elect today nominating the number 2 at the Department of Health and Human Services, Pennsylvania's top health official right now, will be the first transgender American to face Senate confirmation for an important sub-cabinet post. A 180-degree change in immigration policy, including the Department of Homeland Security cabinet nominee saying he will stop construction of the Trump border wall. The State Department nominee, we will be back in the Paris Climate Accords by this time tomorrow night. The scope of the change that is coming, beginning at noon tomorrow, I think we haven't spent enough time on it because of the importance of the moment, the final hours of Trump, the insurrection and the security it has brought to the nation's capital, and the important, both symbolic and policy statement the president-elect will be making by paying tribute to the 400,000 victims of COVID here in the United States. It is stunning.
I can't tell if anyone's watching or not.
Every layer. Trumpism will continue to live in the Republican Party. That is a story we are going to have to follow for weeks and months and years. But Trump policy begins to go away at noon tomorrow, and the scope of the change and the quickness of the change outlined by the Biden team is stunning.
It truly is stunning. Gloria Borger is with us as well. You've done a lot of reporting on Biden over the years. Gloria, what does it say to you that he decided to hold this memorial service right now, honoring the 400,000 victims of this pandemic?
It says to me that it's very important to him and that he wants to set a different tone in Washington. You know, this is someone, as we've been talking about this afternoon, who suffered an awful lot of grief of his own. And I think he understands he can help people through their grief. One way he does it is by talking about it. And this is a man, I'll never forget a story told to me by a staffer of his who said to me after Biden got some really bad news about Beau, and they were sitting in his office, and he was vice president at the time, and she said to him, how do you do this? How do you get through this? And he looked at her very sadly and said, you know, unfortunately, I know how to get through this. I've been there. So he's done it more than once. And the staffer said to me, imagine the worst thing that you can imagine happening to you in your life happened to him twice. And so you just don't pick up empathy on the street. You don't say, oh, this is something I need to learn. It is something he lives, and it is something he does when he picks up the phone and calls people after they've lost someone, when he takes aside a child and says, you know, I used to stutter too. Let me help you figure out how to do it. It is how he has survived.
Okay.
And
you can watch on CNN. Bye.
He has remained optimistic because he knows